Right, good morning. Welcome, everybody. Friday, and it is the end of May. Goodness me, can you believe it? The year's almost half gone. What happened? What happened to 2021? It's disappeared on us. But that's probably because there are no rules. So we're talking about world with no rules this morning. So Tabisa, this is all your fault. You started talking about no rules yesterday, then you gave us a whole bunch of rules around things. So yeah, let's see what thoughts you've had about no rules this morning. So over to you, Tabisa.
Okay, I'll talk about, situation that I had yesterday first before I get to the no rules thing. I bought bread, brown bread. I wanted bread out the oven. So I took a loaf rather. It was warm and soft. And besides it, was this another loaf and it was cold. It was from another session, you know. But I thought to myself that maybe I'd have to compare the two loaves because I'd have to slice them. It's a bit difficult when you slice warm bread because it can be mushy and crusty and it can just ruin everything. But when you have like cold bread, you can slice the bread and the slices will be perfect. So I took that into consideration and I took the cold bread. So I went and I sliced the bread but it came out mushy and all that. And I was so disappointed. I was so disappointed. I thought to myself that I should have taken the warm, soft bread. At least I'd have something. So I think that life without rules is definitely like that. Like it's too much chaos. Man, I don't even want to contemplate, like a world with no rules. I think it would be horrible. I think that when there's too much chaos, there's a lot of uncertainty. And when there's a lot of uncertainty, life cannot flourish. Jay-Z, one of my favorite rappers ever, in his album, I think in 2008, The Blueprint 3, he referenced that women are actually from Venus and Mars, and men are from Mars. And I like that analogy, because feminine energy, according to Jay-Z, is like, chaos. It represents chaos, and masculine energy, of course, it represents, order. And maybe that's why, like, we're going to Mars and Venus is inhospitable. So I think maybe that's one of the reasons because too much order can actually take you to Mars, but too much chaos cannot do anything. The world has to have a balance, this whole yin yang thing. Um, I think that when you have too much chaos, things cannot happen. A world with no rules, um, you can't necessarily do anything because you are surrounded by chaos. When I think of the word chaos, I think of Mother Nature. Mother Nature is personified, feminine energy. Chaos, too much of that, we can't have that, because Mother Nature, as a trait, is cold and distant. Mother Nature wants your life. It is too much chaos. Um, Too much chaos represents unexplored territory. It represents the unknown. It is brutal. It is just difficult. We can't have a world with no rules. Um, I think that's just my contribution on the topic today. Like, I can't imagine a world with no rules. So thank you, Ivan.
All right, thanks, Tabisa. I think we have to go across to Jazz so she can just set the record straight and put you in your place, Tabisa. Jazz, what are your thoughts?
For me, I also can't imagine a world without law because it would be a disaster, as I mentioned yesterday. Because like at home, you have laws. If there was one time when we were kids, our parents left us. Like I'm the one in charge, and I have like six brothers. I have six brothers, and I'm the eldest, so I'm in charge. But then, since I'm just a kid, I'm around like 11. I decided to let them play, and I don't have any rules, and we ended up hurting ourselves. One of my brother got his arms broken, so yeah, that's just a house without rules because my parents left us. So how about in a world without rules? I can't imagine what will happen. Yeah, there would be a chaos, a disaster, because laws are there to make us organized, to keep us safe. And if there's no law, people will do things out of their own will. So there will be abusive people out there. There will be a lot of crime. So I prefer a word with laws. But yeah, I really can't imagine what will happen if there's no law at all.
All right, thanks, Jez.
I want to hear
So,
Trevor because Trevor's the one who made suggested this topic yesterday.
all right, well, there we go. That must be a law. So now Jez has said it's Trevor's turn, so it's Trevor's turn.
Right, so I've given Tobisa the bad news that I had my eye on the Curiosity channel yesterday, and I got a fantastic hour's worth of Friedrich Nietzsche. And you know what, Tobisa, you inspired me to listen into what made this guy, because I really had not studied him at all. And I've heard you making comments, etc., on Nietzsche, and as you talk, I see that you are hugely influenced by him. And the sad news for you is that I believe you got it wrong. So in the future, we can have some of these discussions, okay? But if, I mean, if you had to come into my house and tell my wife that she is the root cause of chaos, I would advise you to bring some bandage for your head, because it would be knocked off your shoulders. Right, so rules. Why did we get to this thing of no rules? It was very interesting for me watching this Nietzsche and his philosophies and how they developed, because he also seemed to be going through in the mid 1800s this concept of no, this Christian world is just not working. So he said, he turned around and said, well, what if there's no God? Which is basically the sort of discussion we have in here. What if there are no rules? And it was interesting how he was reframing his thinking as a result of his perspective at that particular time, because the church was all around, and he was looking around and he couldn't see any good in the world in that system. And so he said, well, let's have a different system. And maybe that's the sort of thing that we were doing yesterday, looking from our perspective. And I hear Jazz, and I think we go through this thinking in our minds. Geez, and I've got so many thoughts. I want to go down these different routes. Nothing to do with Chaos Ed or whoever wrote that comment. Because I think one of the routes I quickly want to go down here before I get to answering Jazz and her perspective is that Nietzsche died at age 44. He was a puppy, man. He didn't have enough time to experience life as some of us have actually experienced life. And I think we've got hundreds of thousands of way better, deeper, more informed thinkers in our world today than ever existed in Nietzsche's time. I mean, he wouldn't even actually get onto YouTube or make a dent on those platforms today. So I don't even know why we sit and think that that his philosophies are the foundation of great thinking. And by the way, it looks as though the Nazis and Adolf Hitler completely misinterpreted what Nietzsche was talking about. Don't shake your head, I'm telling you now. Yeah, this is my rule book that you're actually following at the moment. Now, to get back to Jazz, Jazz from her perspective, turned around and said, no, she believes there's got to be rules because it gives you safety and order and all that sort of thing. Well, I'll tell you, Jazz, where we sit at the moment here, and the TV that we look at and the information that we look at, we're starting to get the feeling within our environments that regardless of all the supposed rules and laws and all this sort of thing, we in our country are starting to live in a completely lawless society. That tends to be the standard feedback that comes through from people in our country. So, and probably there are the rules, and the vast majority of people that don't say boo or bar or squeak, they follow the rules. But what stands out is the lawlessness that is just growing and growing and growing in our country. And I was just watching our Minister of Police, who is now invoking or wants to invoke the rule that all lawfully owned guns should now be taken away from citizens who have the right to actually protect themselves, enshrined in the Constitution. Why? Because he turns around and says it's guns that are killing our people. And it's actually, if you speak to the normal citizen out there, it's the lawless, the people with unregistered guns that tend to be invading homes at the moment and shooting people. Now, from a perspective, when you feel threatened, you start thinking that you're under the control of criminal elements. So I think there's something to do with, as I'm listening to Jazz, rules work where rules are enforced. But where they are not enforced, then maybe you don't want to have the rule that turns around and says, I can't have a gun to protect myself in a lawless society. I therefore want no rules, so that when you come into my home, I can actually knock your head off as quickly as possible, without the concern that the rule says if someone comes into my home and I shoot them, I'm the one that will go to court and end up in prison. So it's very interesting. And this posing of no rules came from our discussion yesterday, where I was trying to go down the route of, well, maybe I was going down the same route that Nitschke was going. If the 10 commandments are out there and we've got this lawless society and they're not working, how do we reduce it down to maybe 3 things? And then if I'm reducing it down to 3 things, how do I reduce it down to just 1 thing? And that seemed to be exactly what Nitschke was going through. And then if we're going to reduce it down to 1, well, why the hell have any rules at all? And what would the world be like? I think if there were no rules in the world, we'd then be on our toes and not expect other people to look after ourselves. We would begin looking after ourselves as we should be doing. But you know what, I think that Jazz is right. We can't have a world without rules, but I would like to be able to do what the lawless do and drive down the wrong side of the road and just go and take people's properties as and when I want. And then it gets down to power, and that's where Nitschke was wrong. He turned around and said, this world is built upon the base of people who are powerful and the poor ordinary Joes out there would just love to follow powerful people. So it's all about power. That's rubbish.
It's all about money. He holds the money, holds the power. So, Jasper, how's your world without rules?
Well, it's difficult to follow in the lustrous footsteps of Dabiso and Jazz and Trevor and Nitschke and the powerful. So I don't know. I can see little connection points in all of that, but I I think if I just talk from the heart, in my case, I would say rules, good or bad, give certainty. You can then dislike or like them, but rules give certainty. And without certainty, there's paralysis. People don't move forward, they don't take action. Once there's rules, then I can decide I don't like the rules. And just coming back to the example of being a child, that child, it's just in his nature to test whatever rules is in that household, and no household has the same rules. But there are basic stuff that the parents decide, in my house, that's what the rules will be. And the children then quickly embark on testing the limits of the rules. So in that testing of the limits of the rules, I think they then discover themselves. I think they then develop creativeness. And I think all of us who have more than one child realize that, whatever rules you have, your enforcement of the rules, and I think Lee gave a bit of an example yesterday in earthing, that it then tends to also build the parents. So the rules are still there. So, but how do you enforce them? But those rules of between parent and child is normally made out of love, and without it being written down or spoken, the children picks it up, and they somehow endure it, and they tend to then repeat the same rules when they grow up to become adults. So I think that whole thing of having boundaries, whether you like the boundaries or not, then it's your nature to and all we do on people that instead of trying to build economies, it actually hamper economies. So what does a good entrepreneur do? He says, all right, those are your rules. Let me see where there are gaps in this thing, and I work within the rules, but somehow work outside the rules so that I can get my thing done. So I think it's in the nature of man to be like water. You can try and dam me up here, but then I'll just find another crook of nanny or whatever, and I'll find another way to flow because you're stopping my flow now. So within that, and in a good society, they have the minimum rules and only there to guide social interaction. And when it comes to business, it's basically just to, as far as possible, make the playing field as level as possible. So I think the whole thing of rules or not rules is, the reality is, it's in man's natures to make his own rules. Even our habits, getting up at a certain time in the morning, going for a run at a certain time, that's a rule that we set for ourselves. But the nice thing is, because we set it, we can change it. So it's in a man's nature to have rules. The problem is, if we put two people together, then our rule starts clashing, and then it comes back to who's the most powerful. And your power comes from, do I control your need, and can I provide your basic need, and then maybe then you'll submit to my law or not. I think our big thing is that's it. The distrust. Laws are going to be inevitable, and as an entrepreneur, I'm constantly testing and questioning the laws on business, but I'm not stopped by it. And hopefully, if enough people find how stupid the law is, hopefully over time, it's not just a quick way to change it, but over time you then find a politician that you vote into power who starts becoming your power in the institution to change the laws. And on an annual basis, laws are changed because of the so-called politicians who represent the so-called minds of the people. Unfortunately, like Trevor said, in South Africa, we don't have equal representation. We have a clique of a few people who have absolutely no competence and not representing, but they're the inner circle, and there's a whole pattern in our system. But it'll change, because in the circles that I move, people are slowly starting to take ownership in their own hand. Local communities are mobilizing, and fortunately for us, a few years ago, the constitution changed that allows independent candidates that no longer have to be part of a party to stand in the community, and they can go all the way up to parliament of it. So I think the other thing is good laws, and we don't know about the laws to enforce the laws. So yeah, let me lawfully get out of this mess.
You're getting yourself into a tangle there, Jasper, and even confused your internet for a moment or two, because it was wobbling quite nicely. But that's probably just the sunspots, which is just the law of nature. So Ed, let's go across to you next.
Yeah, I thought it was quite interesting, because I noticed when Jasper was starting to sort of break up, you were fiddling about with the controls. So I did wonder whether you were playing with the internet, Ivan. Trevor has some bad news for Tabiso about Nietzsche. I've got some even more bad news for Tabiso about Jay-Z. The whole thing about men from Mars, women from Venus, he nicked from a book in 1992 by a guy called John Gray, a very interesting book. And this whole thing about women creating chaos or energy or whatever, it's just that women are different. And when I read that book, actually, it really improved my relationships with women, because I always used to try and solve their problems for them. Women don't want men to solve their problems. They want to be listened to. So that kind of really changed me. And I thought Trevor wanting to have no laws so he could shoot people was really strange. Just imagine if there were no laws and you bought a new house. And because there were no building regulations, and because there were no avenues to legal redress, the builder decides to not connect the pipes to the sewerage system. So you move in, you're quite happy, and then 2 months down the line, you're in deep doo-doo. And that's why we have laws and rules, because it makes life easier. And if you don't have rules, you have to spend all your time on your toes to fight off everyone else. So you haven't got time to create things, to be inventive. And rules have allowed us to progress. And people talk about nature being chaos. Nature isn't chaos. Nature is incredibly ordered. And if you think about it, nature has rules, because they don't want to spend all their time killing each other. They want to spend time surviving. So many animals will mark out their territory. So another animal knows, oh, I won't go in there. Okay, he might decide to break the rules, in which case there's a bit of a fight. But actually, rules are there to protect nature, to protect ourselves. And we only develop because of rules, and those rules were developed for the family, for the tribe, for the country, for the world. We tend not to enforce world rules so good. And over time, it becomes not enforcement, but compliance. Now, we do not have guns in the UK. Domestic citizens do not own guns in the UK, because we all know we don't go around shooting each other. Very occasionally we get a criminal that might come along and shoot someone. They tend to shoot other criminals, which is quite nice, because it keeps the population of criminals down. And I wonder what people in South Africa would think about the rules if you went back, say, 20, well, probably more than 20 years now, isn't it? Say 30 years. Maybe you have a different view of the rules then, and different view of politicians then. But I think without rules, we cannot have creativity, we cannot have progress, because we're constantly fighting people trying to nick our stuff. You know, I have a house because, you know, that's the way the rules work. So, and when it comes to creativity, if I'm writing, there's a style of writing called microfiction or flash fiction. You're only allowed to use, and it varies depending on the competition, but say 500 words to write a story. You try writing a story in 500 words, or if you're trying to write a poem, there are various rhyming structures which then force you into a way of thinking and a creativity. So rules actually increase creativity. So they prevent us from having to fight off the horde so we can get on and, invent Neuralink or something. And occasionally we just need to look at them and think, well, are they appropriate? Because sometimes when the world changes, the rules when you're a child are perhaps different than when you're an adult. So yeah, I think rules are a really good thing. They've allowed us to progress. I think what isn't a good thing is constrained thinking, but rules don't constrain your thinking. They stop other people from killing you so you can carry on thinking. And then if you think the rules are wrong, we have processes to change them. And it's interesting that as civilization evolves, there needs to be less enforcement because we accept them as good things. So that's my thoughts.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, I'm not sure I entirely agree with what you're saying. I think rules and laws are a human fabrication totally. Yeah, they're laws of nature, but I think those are a very different thing. I think the laws of man have been put in place to serve those who make the laws, rather than to serve those who are supposed to obey the laws. I mean, if the world was just left to its own and there was no human interference and intervention, it would run very, very well. It will be balanced, it will be happy, it will be productive, it will be sustainable. And what have our species done to further any of that? Not a hell of a lot, unfortunately. In fact, most of it's to the converse. So yeah, if the first humans who decided to start putting rules and laws in place hadn't been allowed to, maybe there'd been a rule to say they couldn't, I think the world would be a very different place. And you speak about prey and the predator and those sorts of things. Yeah, there are certainly things that govern those and territories and so on. But guess what? They're not enforced by anybody. Nobody's policing them. Nobody's being put in jail if they break them. Yeah, there might be a scrap every now and again if someone crosses a boundary that they shouldn't have crossed. But that's how you work out where the boundaries are. And I think nature is so well balanced and so finely tuned when it's allowed to be so. And that's not you to be so, that's nature to. Okay, all right, now we're getting silly. But so I think, I think we've just messed it up as humans. I think we've broken all the rules that we should have kept, and we've kept all the rules we should have broken. And that's why we're in this mess that we're in. Yeah, the question is whether we can ever go back. I don't know that we can. I think our little stay on this planet, as short as it has been, the last, who knows how long, the debates range between hundreds of thousands of years and millions of years. We certainly are the newcomers in this environment, and I don't think we've contributed particularly positively to the environment. So yeah, I think if we were to take all the rules out, take all the laws out, take all the lawmakers out, and let nature rebalance itself, yeah, there'd probably be carnage for a while. But eventually things would settle down and they'd probably balance themselves out. So I think a world without man-made laws would actually be a great one. Anyway, those are just some of my thoughts. Good. anyone else want to add a final note to that? We are sort of at the bottom of the hour, but otherwise, a topic for Monday would be good. Yes, Ed.
I just wanted to suggest a topic for Monday, which might be we select a saying from Nietzsche and either criticize it or support it, seeing as Tobiso seems so fond of it and Trevor seems so anti. And you put, I think it was you that put a few quotes in there. So we could just do a little bit of research over the weekend and decide which one we like. I don't know whether that's a goer.
Why not? No rules here. We can do anything we want.
And if I can tell you, if you can get hold of the Curiosity channel and look at they titled this thing the world's greatest geniuses. And I don't think this guy was a genius at all. He was committed to a mental asylum, was completely insane, had problems with relationships and all sorts of things, and the people call him a genius. No, come on, man. So I will have no problem criticizing him on Monday.
Yeah, and if you want to just take that a little bit further, get onto Netflix and watch something called The Dangerous Method. And that's the story about Freud and Jung, and you can just see how crazy they were as well. So, I mean, these are the fathers of modern society. I mean, you know, we're ruled by or defined by a bunch of madmen. But anyway, what can we do? Okay, so that's
a very interesting phrase, isn't it? Bunch of mad men. So well, perhaps it would be better had we been a matriarchy.
Absolutely. I mean, just look at it. Some of the best run societies in nature are run by the females. You know, I mean, you know, look at bees, look at ants, look at lions, look at elephants. All run by the females in the tribes. Hyenas, and all run very, very well. Yeah, society, humans.
Yeah, I thought that crossed my mind that I just want to add into. I mean, there's a lot of store in terms of the how-to, and I have a look at all these books, positive motivation, inspiration, and all that sort of thing. And we tend to throw a reference back to Napoleon Hill and Think and Grow Rich, 1925. But it strikes me that this type of guy was perhaps reading information that was coming from these type of guys, the Marxes, the Jungs, the Freuds, and Nietzsche, and that, as their information was the key source of philosophy at the beginning of last century. And was a guy like that stimulated? And if you think through a male-oriented patriarchal world at the turn of the last century, that's why I don't think these guys would actually make it today. I think we've got guys like Tobiso and 100,000 other youngsters that are way better informed today that can out-genius these people that are billed as the greatest geniuses of all time. What a load of podswallop. Tobiso, come on, hurry up, write your book, man.
All right, so we're going to dismantle or build up Nietzsche on Monday. So that should be fun. All right, folks, have a great weekend, and hopefully we'll see you Monday morning. Go well.
Cheerio.